In operations, we're used to using manufacturing language to describe efficiency and productivity, sometimes to our detriment. You see, people are not machines who can be fine tuned with the twist of a wrench or the oiling of a hinge. Hi, I'm Alicia Butler Pierre, and it's this very mindset that can lead to safety violations and infractions in the workplace. And compromises in safety don't just happen physically. Mental health is also key to everyone on your team operating at peak performance. As leaders, we can't afford for anyone on our team to feel excluded, shunned, or just plain burnt out. Today's guest is going to introduce a new metric for us to consider in transforming the way we operate. Ditch those caffeinated drinks you consume to help manage your time. We're about to learn how to manage our energy naturally, so that we can operate better than ever before. This is Season 12, Episode 154. Let's start the show.
Welcome to Business Infrastructure, the podcast about curing back office blues of fast-growing businesses. If you're a business owner or operator looking for practical tips and solutions to scaling your business in a sustainable manner, you're in the right place. Now here's your hostess, Alicia Butler Pierre.
We are approaching the end of Season 12. Can you believe it? It went by so fast. And we've been unpacking two important areas impacting the way so many of us operate our businesses, especially since the pandemic. And that's diversity and digital transformation. Today, we have a special guest joining us in New York City, Dr. Mohammed Soliman. Not only is he a physician, but he's also a certified career transition and life coach who also happens to have an MBA. So listen, he knows all about the links between entrepreneurship, business, and mental health. Dr. Soliman, you're laughing already. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you for the invite. And it's always a pleasure to reconnect, Alicia.
You know what? I'm sure people who are listening so far, they must think that we've been friends and buddies for a very long time. But believe it or not, everyone, Dr. Soliman and we've known each other, a couple of months now as of this recording? Yes. But, I remember that very first phone conversation that we had. I think we were scheduled to talk for just a few minutes and we ended up talking for 2 hours.
2 hours.
Yes. Total kindred spirit. And I must give a shout out to our mutual colleague who connected us to each other, Marie Incontrera. So, you have such a fascinating background and career. And I definitely want to make sure that we touch on a lot of the highlights of your career and things that you've learned and picked up along the way that can definitely help us as business owners as we try to navigate all of the change that's come about recently, especially because of the pandemic. But first, Dr. Soliman, I was trying to figure out where's the best place to start. And I thought, you know what? Why not just start from the beginning? So you're from one of my favorite countries, Egypt. And so can we start there with, where exactly did you grow up in Egypt?
So it's good that we go to the very beginning.
Let's go to the beginning.
Place to start. Do you know which line is this from? It's a very good place to start. When we talk, we begin with ABC. It's Sound of Music.
Okay.
Maybe I'm outdating myself here.
No, you're not. The Sound of Music. That's with Julie Andrews, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. One of my favorite movies of all time. So I am a son of 2 Egyptian parents, but I wasn't born in Egypt. I was born in Kuwait, the little tiny country sandwiched between Iraq and Saudi, and famous for the Gulf Storm. And around the Gulf Storm time, my family decided, well, this is not a good time to stay here. So we went to Egypt, where my parents are originally from. Having said that, they met in Kuwait. My grandparents were in Kuwait. So we have been in Kuwait for years, even before the oil revolution. And I grew up there and did my undergrad there in pharmacy. So I was in high school. The standard exam across the country It's not one exam, it's like an exam for each subject. And then everyone gets ranked across the country. And then based on this and the grade, you can choose the school. So no interviews. And it happened that time I was ranked fifth out of the, I think in my cohort was 250,000 students. So I had the
Whoa.
chance to choose. And thankfully, I chose pharmacy. At the time, I wasn't really sure about medicine. And I was 16. And I give my parents a lot of credit that they let me do and choose a career that I like. I loved chemistry and I loved science and I wanted a professional career. So pharmacy was a great option. And I loved it.
Mm.
I loved it. I was top of my class every year. And then when I graduated, this is where things start to look more real. As you know, in pharmacy, the room for self development is not big. Your
Mm.
biggest hope is to own your own pharmacy. And so I thought, that is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. So I worked a little bit, but then I decided to go to research. Did a little bit of research. And so I loved it. And that took me, this a little bit took me 10 years because I fell in love and I continue to be in love with it. So that moment, I start to apply to schools, did my master's in biochemistry and molecular biology. That was in Alberta, Canada. And then did my PhD in genetics in Toronto with the late Tony Paulson. And that was a turning point. So Tony Paulson in Canada is, I would say, perhaps Canada's best bid for a Nobel Prize in medicine. And he had similar discoveries in cancer research. Unfortunately, during this time, his wife was struggling with illness. And so that also affected him heavily. And for 4 years, I have seen the impact of mental illness on a
Mm.
very bright mind.
Wow.
And unfortunately, I lost him a year before graduation
Oh my goodness.
at the age of, he was only 60. And I clearly remember that time, yeah, August 2013. In August 2012, Thomson Reuters predicted he will win the Nobel Prize. And it's such a loss for the country.
Mm.
And I used to see life from the angle of cancer because this is my 10 year of work. I did my master's in cancer, cancer and aging. I did my PhD in cancer genetics, cancer cell signaling, and metabolism. So the fact that to lose someone to mental illness was new.
Wow.
And during that time, I said, okay, it's time to use my knowledge in something that would help people in similar situation. And I was skeptic about psychiatry. Why? As you would imagine, my background comes from precise sciences.
Mm-hmm.
Pharmacy, very precise. Genetics, to a lot of extent, precise. And then psychiatry, it's all about uncertainty.
Mm.
Even the rules are vague. But that's what got me to medical school. I went to medical school in New York, Cornell, with the idea of doing psychiatry, and I never changed my mind. I got attracted to medicine, family medicine, but this will be under psychiatry in general. Like I wouldn't go and do them on their own. And in the way, an opportunity came by. I'm a lifelong student with a merit scholarship to an MBA, also at the same school I did my medical school in, but different city. So I did my medical school in Cornell, but the MBA is in Ithaca. And I said, okay, if I got this scholarship, I will go. If not, it's fine. And thankfully, I received it. It was terrific experience. Absolutely
Mm.
eye-opening. And you can relate to this, Alicia. You did your MBA, and it is something about the way you look at the world that is different.
Yes.
Yep. And that that's the story, at least academically. On the side, coaching has been part of me, but uh, non-formalized. And so I decided to say, okay, what? I think I'm doing this with people and for people, but let's try to have it more of a formal structure. And I didn't realize there's a career where you can be a life coach. And the student in me said, try to learn it the right way. So I joined the International Coach Federation program, took the exams and the training, and then became, as you mentioned, ICF certified coach. My two focuses are career transition and time, and I cross out time and put energy management.
Ah, I
Mhm.
like that.
Because we can't control time. We can only control energy. Time is fixed. It's 24 hour. It's not going to expand unless humanity decided that we all are going to change the 24 hour to be 30 hour.
Mm.
And then we have, or 36 hours. And then the hour that we define as hour would be 3/4 of an hour. Like that's the new hour. But energy is different because it can't be dissipated, or no, it can't be wasted. You can always channel it. Energy waxes and wanes during the day. So we can put certain things in certain times. But the only way we can have time management if we are like machines, our energy 6 a.m. exactly the same as 6 p.m., exactly the same as 11 p.m., which is not the case.
No, it's not. Because, and it's interesting listening to you talk about energy management as opposed to time management. So at first I thought where you were going with this was something from a metaphysical perspective. But you're literally talking about it sounds, when you say energy, you mean, mental alertness and acuity and agility and being able to function at peak performance for
Exactly.
8 to 12 hours a day.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes. Sometimes you can go to your email at a certain time of the day and your fingers are just not typing. And you don't know why. Like you can't formulate a good email. And certain times of the day, you can write 10 emails and really flawless emails. And it's one of them will take you, whatever, say half an hour. The other one will take you 3 hours. And the difference is, as you mentioned, the acuity, the attention, and it all comes from our energy at that point.
It's interesting hearing you say that because, we focus on operations and business infrastructure on this podcast. And so to your point, people are not machines. So we
Exactly.
can't we cannot, just as we may design a machine to run continuously, nonstop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we obviously can't do that or expect that from people. So to your point, I think it's really interesting because when we talk about processes and having systems for your company, we always have to take into account that people factor. Some people are morning people. For example, I'm a morning person, but if you caught me at between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. on a weekday, I am of no use to you. And I try really hard not to schedule meetings or make any important decisions at that time of day because I know I'm just, like you said, if I attempted to type an email, it might take me an hour to put it together. Whereas if I were up at 6 o'clock in the morning, I might get it done in 5 minutes. So is that something that you help your clients figure out where they happen to, at what times of day they have their maximum potential or peak performance?
Yes. And I'm
Ah,
so happy that you did this experiment on yourself to know the time. And it's good that you have observed it longitudinally because one day, 2 days, even sometimes a week might not be enough. Because what will happen if you had bad news the week before, and so it affected your next week? So
mm,
you can't separate the what we call confounding factors. So the other things that are not really contributing to the cause, and then you will think, oh, actually, my downtime is this and this, but it happened that you are sleeping more to avoid facing the consequences of these bad news that happened the week before. So it needs to be on longitudinal time and a scale that will tell you, okay, I think consistently, I see that 1 to 3, just I am in the la la land. I am not here. So I better I better not drive. I better not talk to someone. I better nap. I will do something, exercise. But yeah, I'm not going to take any risk or have important meetings.
that's an interesting exercise for those who are listening who we hear of all of these personality type tests,
Yeah.
personality assessment tests, and things like that. Do you have a tool, Dr. Solomon? And we will get into this a little bit later into the podcast, but since we're talking about it, I may as well ask you now. Is there some type of assessment tool that you share with your clients that they can then maybe apply to their team members to understand, well, when does Bob perform best during the day versus Jane or Susie? And is that a thing, in terms of understanding where people's peak performance in terms of time of day? Is that something that you have?
So I would call it, yeah, the energy audit for them.
Ah, energy
And
audits.
they can do it without even a specific tool. They just have a paper with them and they use plus, minus, or a dash as neutral.
Mm,
And this starts from the moment they have the alarm on. So when the alarm kicks in, do they really wake up or they snooze? If they snooze, so that's negative. And I try to avoid the term negative energy because it's very colloquial and it has different meanings to different people. And physics people will smash us if we say negative energy in a
mm,
different context. But I say negative as negative to you. You are not achieving something that you would like to achieve. And it doesn't have to be productive, it could be you want to achieve a 20-minute meditation when you wake up in the morning, and snoozing will just make you sleep and this time is gone.
mm,
And then you continue with this throughout the day. Yes, it is tedious, but it's the same as diet tracks, the same as time track. Uh, Obviously, time will be there, but it is not as a way to manage it, is a way just to notice. Put it's like a landmark. This is a time where energy go down or up, and it's associated with tasks. So we can only manage the energy and the task demands. So waking up is a task. Going to bed is a task. Some people, as you know, it's just almost self-sabotage behavior. At 10 or 11, go on any social media they like and stay up until 1. And there is no really valid reason except for what people would call ego depletion,
mm,
which is basically the idea. And here, my psychology aspect will come in play. Is we make so many energy depleting decisions throughout the day, and the theory, which still debatable, is that we have limited reservoir of mental energy regarding decisions. So, for example, if someone would like to lose weight, and this is something I would say universal for all business owners who just eat whatever available, whenever available, and they are on the go all the time, and they make all these sacrifices. I'm talking about the time where people were together, not the distance. And oh, no to this cookie, no to this thing, no to this thing. Then at night, what they do? Oh, they pass by this ice cream shop and I deserve it.
Yes, I
Yeah.
tell myself that all the time.
Yeah. I deserve it. And then that's the moment of ego depletion where they get amount of ice cream that is double the calories in the cookies they said no to, versus
Mhm.
I deserve it and then take a little bit. And the same with the social media, like no social media, no social media. And then at night, the overcompensation. So the solution for this is usually people can pepper it. So during the day, if they can have 5 minutes here, 10 minutes here, and knowing that going to bed is energy positive task,
Mm.
and that's it. So you can't, once you know it is energy positive thing, you stop, and then you can compensate. Some people do it the other way around with 1 day a week where they call it the cheat day. I don't like the term cheat day. You can call it the relaxed day, the non-ego depletion day, where they allow themselves an hour or two of social media or a whole pizza
Mm.
for 1 day. And then this will stop the craving. And then they are managing the rest of the week. Okay. Yeah. So ego depletion is something that we all fall into, myself included. Uh, just how we can minimize it, because we
Yeah.
can't really get rid of it. We just minimize it.
And I would think it sounds like everything that you've been describing, Dr. Solomon, is about awareness.
It is.
So becoming more aware, and then I would imagine once you are more aware, that's when you can, to your point, not minimize it, or at best minimize it without completely removing it altogether.
Mhm.
But that would actually help you to have a better understanding of when to do certain tasks or when to do certain things.
And your triggers, yes.
And your
So if you
triggers.
know
Okay.
that there is an ice cream shop on your way or in this thing, it's like, okay, I'll take a different route. It's and then the mind will be programmed to take the different route. And so with managing these points of energy, because this has nothing to do with time, you can stop by this shop 10 minutes and then eat it on your way. But you know that in terms of energy, you are maybe having short-term leisure, but you will not be happy in 2 days because I have added this number of pounds, or I just feel sluggish because of the sugar.
Mhm.
But obviously everything in moderation is okay. Just when it becomes I deserve it, that is the dangerous association. Yeah.
And I've told myself that so many times.
Yeah.
I have a quick funny story I'd like to share with you.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
listening to you talk about time and time management, and the fact that you've lived in so many different countries, I thought you would especially appreciate this story. So, I worked on an archaeology project in Luxor, Egypt,
Oh,
back in 2012. Did I tell you about that? Okay,
no,
so we'll
no.
have to have an offline conversation about that. I'll tell you
Oh,
all about that. So
this is
now
lovely.
here's what's interesting. I went there, Dr. Solomon, with all of these ideas about how I was going to improve the process. And, I had some conversations with some of the people on the archaeology team that were there. So it was a team of British people, Egyptians, and Americans, and had prepped for about 6 to 7 months. And I went there, showed up, and I had all of these ideas about how to improve a process, truthfully, that I had never physically laid eyes on. And here's what happened. They told us, okay, well, our workday starts at 5 o'clock in the morning. And it's like, wait, what? Say what? Can you repeat that? Huh? So we work from 5 to noon. It's like, well, why? But I quickly understood why, because of
Mhm.
the heat.
Yes.
So I was there in the summertime, 2012, And for those of you listening, if you've never been to the desert before, let me tell you, dry heat, it is a different, it's on another level, right, Dr. Solomon?
Yep.
It's on a completely different level. I felt like the sun was burning my soul. Like it just completely
Yep.
went through my body.
Yep.
Straight to my soul. But what's interesting though is you after a few days you become acclimated to it and you get used to it. But my point is I went there with certain perceptions. I had my own implicit bias about how things should work without it. And even though I had conversations with people, I still didn't really have an appreciation for the climate, the geography, the culture, the country itself. And it took me having to be there and realizing, oh my goodness, I can't do anything the way that I was going to recommend we do it. First of all, I remember it would get so hot that pencils would actually start to bend. And,
Yes.
and my compass, I had a notebook, and the cover of my notebook, the ink from the cover of the notebook actually started to melt onto my shirt. I'm just trying to give the listeners an appreciation of just how hot it can really get. And that's why we had to work from 5 a.m. in the morning until noon, because the sun just beats you down. You just, from an energy depletion standpoint, you have no energy if you try to work after 12 o'clock noon. So I just thought that was a really quick, funny story.
And it relates well to the energy versus time, because if you look at the time, it is 7 hours.
Yes.
You just moved from 9 to 4 or 9 to 5 plus the lunch hour, so 7 plus lunch hour, to 5 to 12 without the lunch hour.
Yes.
Because lunch will be after 12.
Correct.
But because it moved in a frame that is not your frame, it felt as if it is not 7 hours. It might have felt longer. And after 12, you just depleted.
And here's something else that's interesting. It was Ramadan.
Oh.
So you couldn't go and get anything to
Yes. Yes.
You had to wait until 6 p.m. And so here's the other thing, Dr. Solomon. So I went there knowing that it would be during Ramadan. But here's what I didn't understand. I didn't have an appreciation for the fact that everything would be closed.
Yes.
So yes, everything is shut down until what? Until the sundown, right? Until about 6 or 7 p.m. in the evening.
Yeah, it's sundown. So it will depend on the season. Summer tends to be later. So it'd be 7. Winter time will be 5.
Yes. So again, a very classic example of here I am, well-intentioned, thinking I'm going to come in, I have all of this process improvement expertise, and we're going to streamline the way that certain artifacts are being cataloged and the restoration and conservation process. And yeah, I was in for a very rude awakening. But it brings me to something that I'd kind of like to shift gears and out with our conversation just a little bit and talk about how, bias and perception and how we can exert influence or try to exert our way of doing things, thinking that it's the only way, without, again, an appreciation for the culture that we're about to step into. And I'm speaking from a consultant perspective at this point. Every company, every organization is different. And in this case, I was dealing with a different organization inside of a different country.
Yes.
And so even with language, there were all of these different barriers that I just didn't have an appreciation for. And I think, diversity is one of the things that we're kind of framing this conversation around. I'm curious, Dr. Solomon, how do you define diversity in the workplace?
I will use the academic definition by Dr. Stephanie Johnson. And diversity, as defined academically, is basically numbers. It is sad that it came only to numbers, but it's also good because that differentiates from inclusion. And that's where the two get mixed. So diversity, at least in the US, is, say, African American or Black American represent 11 to 12% of the society. What is the representation of this 11 to 12% in, say, the Fortune 500 or in the academic hospitals. And if we see it's only 3 or 4%, then there is a gap. And why is this? And this is very different from inclusion, which you narrated a wonderful story about when you were on my show and your experience in Monsanto. And that was an inclusion problem. So all what we are focusing on now is diversity, but where's the inclusion? People come in and they want you to fit in a certain frame. It is, you can't come in as who you are. You have to come in as what we are. So, especially for women listening to this, it's still absurd to me that maybe because that's the male perspective, that males impose certain hairstyles on women as professional or non-professional. So for Black American, because of the different hairstyle, you might better know this than I do, Alicia. They have to straighten the hair, right? Or put a wig or something like that as professional.
To your point, to fit in, to
yes,
have
exactly.
It,
but that's expected, right?
Straighten your hair.
Yes, yeah. And this is strange to me because there's difference between straightening your hair and having your hair in place. And I find this against inclusion. Like, why are you imposing certain standard? It's the same way I don't ask a female to, you need to have certain makeup. So it didn't, the word stopped at diversity now. Really stopped at diversity. And we are still struggling with the inclusion part. And that is the hardest thing. Is one of the Jewish writers, I can't remember who was, he said something funny, but it really explains it nicely. Not being included as someone of, say, people of color, especially Latino American, the Black American, the Native American, is like a heterosexual man going to a lingerie store. You know, and everyone around you know that you do not belong here. So it's like, why are you here? And that is the thing that I hope will be more of the focus. So now we treat it as only numbers, which is okay, that's a step forward. But how we make sure that these people, when you get in, they have the right environment to get promoted. They have the right environment that will help them. If they don't want to stay in this company and they want to go to a different company, they have the support of this company. It's not like feel your arm twisted, or you should be grateful that we accepted you. This is the part that's still, and maybe I'll say you tell me about your opinion about this point, but I think this is where the bottleneck is now.
Now, I completely agree with you. And I guess I didn't think about it that way because I know there are people who actually specialize in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I'm not in that space. I just, I can speak to it from my personal experiences. And that's what's been so interesting about this particular season of the show, because a lot of people may be wondering, well, what is diversity and digital transformation? Well, they can understand the digital transformation piece, but what on earth does diversity have to do with the way you operate your business? Well, everything, because again, people are a major component of how we get things done. And if they don't feel included, that impacts their mental health. And I think I'll say this, Dr. Soliman, this is one thing I know that I've personally experienced, especially when I was in the corporate world. And I know so many other people, even people who've been on this as guests on this particular season, have expressed, when you don't feel included, when you feel isolated and ostracized simply for who you are or what you look like, it does impact your mental health. Your mental health then negatively impacts the way that you perform on the job. So it could be that you really are very bright, dedicated, hardworking person. But if you're dealing with all of this other stuff that has nothing to do with your craft itself, you can't show up and perform optimally. And then what ends up happening is you might get fired, you may get laid off, and your performance it's reflected in your performance evaluation. But without that manager or that leader taking time to really understand, okay, is it truly that you don't know your craft, or is it truly that you don't know how to operate this machinery
Yeah.
or do whatever it is that we're asking you to do? Or is it that you are feeling certain pressures that
Mhm.
maybe some of your other team members do not feel,
Mhm.
and it is negatively impacting the way you do your work, which ultimately negatively impacts the entire performance of the team as a whole? So that's why everybody who's listening,
Yes.
that's why this conversation is so important, because, and that's why I'm so glad it's almost like we saved the best for last. This conversation with you, because that mental health component is so absolutely important. And I wish more people spoke about mental health in the context of entrepreneurship in particular, because
Yes.
it's not easy. And one thing that I would love for you to touch on too, if you can, for just a little bit, is I would imagine the number of clients you have has risen substantially as a result of the pandemic, and hearing about the rates of suicide that have increased substantially, especially last year. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then I'd like to get into what a typical client engagement looks like with you.
In terms of the number of and cases of an anxiety, self-reported at least, the CDC mortality report showed that if we compared June of 2020 to June of 2019 and just self-reported an anxiety, depression, there is almost 50% of the population that took this survey or this report reported an anxiety. And I believe, I just would like to get the numbers correct here. I believe it is 35%, something that was incredible, like much, much higher than what we had in 2019 of the same period.
Mm.
And it's not surprising. As you know, it's something people now are alone.
Mm-hmm.
People now, if they want to see a therapist, it takes much longer, if any. Most elective visits are canceled. The good side is that telehealth started to increase, and certain people who didn't have mental health access before, now they have mental health access. But overall, suicidality absolutely increased. Drug use and alcohol use
Mm.
also increased.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is because now people can order booze and they are at home. So
Mm.
nothing really to occupy your
Yes.
time, especially if you are laid off. And you just, that's what you do. And I will tell you something. I now got the numbers. The anxiety and depression tripled during the pandemic.
Wow.
Yep, tripled during the pandemic. And that's self-reported. So we still don't know how much is diagnostically a generalized anxiety disorder or
Mm-hmm.
MDD, major depression disorder. But the fact that they feel this is enough for me to know, and triple is to say there is something really not right. Contributing factors, clear. I mean, loneliness is a big one. Uncertainty. Freud was wrong about many things, but he was right about a couple. Uh, Two things that are important for every person: relationship and their work. And when you lose both, that is a big hit. That's a big hit. People can sacrifice some of their food. Obviously, many people sacrifice health. It's not good, but it happens a lot. But when it comes to the sense of identity and self worth, usually relies on these two. And now they can't meet their family. They have to quarantine for 14 days. Many people had their breakup or even divorce during this time because all of a sudden the people are literally living together. They were living together, but they were not living together in a sense. So now they are living together 24/7 and they're realizing maybe they are so different or things are just magnified, even if they are not truly big. And that's unfortunate. And it hits, trust me, not only people who you think, oh, it's people who are not resilient. No, people who can be extremely resilient sometimes because resilience is a reservoir. If it gets depleted and without adding more, where you will get more from. So it used to be from family, from other sources. Some people manage to use this loneliness and this, I don't want to call it traumatic experience, just to stick with the DSM-5, but it can be traumatizing experience to their advantage in terms of the digital transformation. And yeah, so what they do is, okay, I can't reach out to people, so I will make my own network. So they started to be more online and they discovered social media. And I was one of them. So I didn't have any social media presence except for LinkedIn and sporadically on LinkedIn between 2005 and 2020. So it's a long period and it was intentional because I thought social media can be addictive and can take a lot of focus and attention, and I'm not missing much. And then I realized, well, by August, with July, August last year, we can't communicate anymore with people without some sort of social media, including Zoom. I mean, Zoom, in a sense, it's a meeting platform, but it's also social media platform where you can organize small meeting for a bunch of friends and have coffee time.
Mm-hmm.
And from that point on, yeah, I taught myself with the help of great other people, Instagram, Facebook, even TikTok now.
Oh.
If people would like to go, they're all the same handle. Yeah, I wouldn't imagine myself TikToking, but it is something.
This I have to see.
Yes.
A doctor on TikTok. Okay.
Yes, it is something. And I was like, wow, I went from 0 to this level because of necessity. Because relationships, as I said, is fundamental. And as an extrovert, I needed this connection too. It is, and for finding people and helping without a tool. And I think phones just are out of the question now. Like people don't use them as much in terms of calls, except for something urgent. It's mostly for apps. So we said, okay, that's the time to learn this. And it was a great journey. And I encourage people who are listening to this and are afraid of technology. I was in your shoes. I still have not the biggest appreciation of social platforms, but it is a necessity now, and it's how you use it. It's
Absolutely.
Really, yeah, it's how you use it.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And as it kind of goes back to what you said before in moderation.
Yes.
Right, right. So we're
And knowing
kind of
the why, like why are you using it? It's if
Mhm.
it's just entertainment, okay, say it is entertainment, nothing wrong with that, and then have certain time block for it. It's your me time. If it is for gaining clients, so it is for gaining clients, and then you know what kind of content to put there. If it is for putting content that not is not necessarily for lead generation, and you're not really using it for entertainment, but it is you have an idea that you want to share with the world, like almost a calling. And there are people like this, then that is what it is for. But knowing the why really helps you have
Mhm.
some control.
I knew this was going to happen, Dr. Solomon. Do you see the time?
Yes, I keep, yeah, 5:52. I know.
We didn't even get to like a whole half portion of the interview, but so let me try to see if we can get through this as quickly as possible.
Uh-huh.
And we're laughing, everybody, because Dr. Solomon, before we started recording, he was like, "Oh yeah, I can get this done." Well, yeah, 30 minutes, Alicia. Yeah, no
Yes.
problem.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was like, "No, I don't think so, Dr. Solomon."
Yeah.
Um, because I know you're going to have a lot to say, and it's going to be such good and juicy information. But I do want to say for those who might be listening to the show for the first time, I do want to make sure I don't end this episode without defining what business infrastructure actually is. And it's a system for how you link your people, your processes, and your tools to ensure that growth happens in a profitable and sustainable way. This is going to be so unfair to you, Dr. Solomon, but if we could kind of go through each of those elements and
Yes.
as you walk us through what a typical client engagement looks like for you. So, first of all, with the people aspect of business infrastructure, I'm so curious about this. Which hat do you put on? So you're a counselor, you're a coach, you're a consultant, but you're also a doctor. So when someone first expresses an interest in working with you, which hat do you put on first?
You are hitting the nail on its head. And you know why, Alicia? Because the line need to be drawn
Mm,
very clearly. I tell them I'm not a therapist here. I'm a coach and I'm not a mentor. And the idea, mentor is someone who walked your path before and they give you their life, they give you their story, and then it's up to you to follow it or not. A coach is someone who partnered with you. You are the one who will come up with the solution. And here I will have to quote Jacques Lacan, the great philosopher and psychoanalyst, is a, we the person who is helping you will reformulate the problem. They're not going to solve the problem. You are the one who's going to solve the problem. And so having this clear line really helps a client know that they are in the driving seat and it's not someone imposing something on them. Because we have seen, I mean, in the clinic, you can tell people with a microphone next to their ear, don't eat this because you have diabetes. Sleep is good for you. And they nod and then they leave and then they do something else. So because they don't feel they are in control, it's someone telling them what to do. But what comes from within is usually something that people will stick to.
Now, as far as your process, so you did mention social media. I know you have a website. How do your clients typically find you, Dr. Solomon?
Usually, I have find two different categories of people. People are more traditional, will go through the website, they go on Calendly, they will book even any random time. It doesn't have to be the time that really fit them initially, and they say, hey, these times don't work for me. Would you like to, or do you have time to meet on that day? And then we can work something out. The other way is through Instagram, which I have found it interesting, is through the
Hmm.
DM.
Yes.
Yep, the DM. It's also something new to my lingo, the direct message, where people DM me or through LinkedIn. I've also seen a lot more through LinkedIn, sending me a message and saying, "Oh, I'm interested in this." And then we talk for about an hour to see if they are a good fit and if I'm a good fit for what they're looking for. Because sometimes what they're looking for might not be something I have. And so I can direct them. I tell them, I think this will work better with X or with Y. So if someone wants, like you, Alicia, is an expert in whole operation infrastructure, and they are looking on the surface for something about time management. But when you talk to them, you realize it's not really their time management, it is something in the process, like their business process that is eating the time. And so someone like you will be better serving them than someone like me who will focus more on their own personal time management, or to be more accurate, energy management. And then after that hour, we discuss then if they would like to proceed. And we try to see a plan which lasts usually for 8 weeks. Some people require more. Some people say no, 8 weeks are okay with me. And this is usually like a general frame for how this works. Yep.
And so they mention a specific goal, and that 8-week plan is designed to reach that goal. Is that
yes,
what they?
And usually what they say as a goal ends up being something very different.
Okay.
And that is where I admit that the psychiatry part will help, because what we think as the problem sometimes is the symptom. It's the same with cough, right? If someone comes to you with cough and you think, oh, I need a solution for the cough. But what if this cough is a symptom of something deeper? God forbid, cancer or COPD, or you're coughing because sometimes something completely unrelated to the lung. People who have hyperacidity, they can have cough. This irritation, constant irritation, the esophagus, makes them have dry cough. And so you give them cough suppressant, it will not work. It's just, or it will even work, but will make the underlying disease worse. Because if it's cancer, guess what? We could have caught it early. And I tend to resist the idea of fast solution. Again, Hegel's idea, I'm big Hegelian. If you look at the problem in different light, it will show you the solution. And it is very true that solution sometimes is embedded in the problem. The real struggle is to define the problem. What is the problem? And there are so many solutions on Quora and HBR, and that would can be overwhelming. But solution for which problem? Is it the cough, or are we talking about cancer here?
Sure. And that's why I would imagine, as a plug for you and your services, that it helps for us as entrepreneurs, business leaders, managers, leaders to reach out to someone like you to help us uncover those true root causes, discovering what it's a discovery process. Is what it sounds like.
Discovery, yeah.
Yes,
it is a discovery.
yes.
Yeah, I call it. It's interesting you're saying it discovery. So it is 3 stages. I call the diagnosis, and then the treatment, and then the maintenance, and or in entrepreneurial words, it would be the discovery, and then I try to avoid the term solution, but the treatment still, and then the long-term game and the sustenance of the gains. And the third one is usually hard, is now when people reach certain, they have, say, awareness of where their energy goes and how they can tweak things around, is how can they maintain it long term. So it can't be treated as supplement to their everyday intellectual diet. It needs to be treated as a challenge, and it is a challenge, and people tend to love the challenge. And if it's treated this way, it will maintain long-term effect, at least at the start. it will be a challenge, and then hopefully it will get become part of the daily routine. And I use the term hopefully intentionally because let's admit it, not everyone will be able to do this.
And so, and I apologize. But as we start to wrap things up here, I do want to make sure that I give you the opportunity to talk about any resources that you recommend. I've kind of been capturing a list of some so far. You mentioned Quora, the Harvard Business Review, and the book Inclusify by Dr. Stephanie Johnson, the DSM-5, and I only know that because of some other psychologists and psychiatrists I follow. But Calendly, that's the calendar system that I know you have on your website. LinkedIn messaging, Instagram DM, TikTok.
Yes,
I was not
TikTok
expecting. And
I know. I didn't expect myself to be on TikTok. Next time we talk, I'll tell you I am on this thing that they go Twitch.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah. I'm not a gamer, but I might go twitching.
I've got to see for myself.
Yes.
So your website also, by the way, there's so much valuable content on your website. There's all of these free assessment tools that you have. There's also a really interesting diagram where you kind of show or illustrate the differences and to be able to level set a potential client's expectations around coaching versus consulting versus counseling. So
thank you,
everyone. Make sure you check out drsoliman.com. So that's DR for doctor, Soliman, which is SOLIM, like money, AN.com. So definitely check that out. Are there any other resources, Dr. Soliman, that you wanted to mention to our listeners?
In terms of my social media, the YouTube, I have the shows, Thrive, and the Professional Lounge, where you can watch Alicia as a guest this time. It was so good that we had 2 episodes and it was a blast, absolute blast. Loved it. And she talks about some of the tools she used. She used Notion. She got me into Notion, and I'm thankful to her for this. I'm learning Notion now. And you will learn a lot from people who are ahead of us in this game. And I learned a lot from them today. Well, I'm not sure where it will be released, the episode we're recording now, but as of May 26th, the Thrive episode today was with Tom Kolditz, former brigadier general and true leader in the area of leadership. He established the Door Institute of Leadership affiliated with Rice University. And you can see and learn from these people just by listening to their valuable wisdom. So that's another big source I have. And I would say you will not see me talking a lot on the YouTube. You will usually see my guests who are the true value as who is the one who said language is a prison house? I think it's also Jacques Lacan. And so if I talk and they talk on the show, it becomes a big problem. They take the 80% of the time, which is marvelous, like pearls of their wisdom. It's really, really informative. And for things that are outside of my social media, I would highly recommend Mind Over Mood. This is a classic book. And by the way, I don't get any money from them. I don't know even who the author is, like personally. But this book stood the test of time. It is about managing thoughts and anxiety, feelings of doubt, depression, through cognitive behavioral way. And I recommend it because it's based on evidence. But you will have to do the homework because no one is going to do the homework for you. And I'm circling back here to the very important point again, also for Jacques Lacan. The shrink doesn't give the answer for the problem. The shrink reformulates the problem. He's not going or she's not going to solve the problem. You're the one who's going to solve it. And if you get this book, make sure that you do the exercises in it. This is one book I would absolutely recommend.
And it's mind over mode?
Mind over mood. Yeah.
Mood. Okay.
Mood.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got
Yeah.
it. Got it. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. What's the best way for people to connect with you and follow you and see you on TikTok and Twitch and Instagram?
Not TikTok. You will be. The good thing is all the same handle. Dr. Soliman MD. So Dr. is doctor, and then Soliman Soliman, and then MD like medical doctor. All one word. The same Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Twitter. I tend to be more on Instagram and LinkedIn. Soon enough, will be more on TikTok, but not yet. And I host lives on IG for people also interested in fitness. I firmly believe that mental fitness and body fitness are connected. I'm not saying they are necessary and sufficient. Some people have exceptional physical fitness, but the mind still requires work, and some people the other way around. But overall, there is some connection that if you maintain healthy style of life, your mood will be better. Better than where is the baseline. So I host IG lives with professional coaches and where they answer questions about diet, about fitness, doing exercise from home, nothing. I tell them upfront, don't tell me any exercise from the gym. People are not going to go to the gym. This is just a reality unless they have something at their home or a gym literally next door, especially after the pandemic. So hopefully I can see some of you guys there. And it's an interesting journey overall. And I hope people will not be fearful of talking about back to your point about mental illness and challenges.
Yeah.
Fearful of not only talking about this, but seeking help even quietly. You don't have to make it public, but if you realize that is something not you, start to look around. And I'll leave it open like this. Start to look around. There are many resources now that do not require you to divulge your identity. I know that going to a shrink is a big step. If social worker would work, fine. NP would work, fine. There are apps now. The one thing I would highly advise against, and here my tone and inflection changed a lot. After the blessing of being in social media, I learned about the many gurus who give advice that is absolutely stunning. Like when people tell many, oh, don't care about the opinion of others. Really?
Mm.
This is not true because you will, and that create cognitive dissonance because they try to do this, but then in a world where everyone is evaluated, your work is evaluated, your system is evaluated, it's you would care about people that would matter to you. And you will learn how not to care about certain other people that will not matter to you. But these blatant blanket statements creates cognitive dissonance, which is difference between two different belief systems. On one hand, you want to care about certain things, but someone's telling you the opposite. Oh, be yourself. It's like, which self?
Yeah.
That's
Great
another
point.
thing. Yeah, which self? I mean, when you talk to your kid, is different from when you talk to your project manager. And some people say, oh, but that is who I am. And they blast at work. And it is sad because they learned someone telling them, be yourself, be authentic. But, well, authenticity need to be defined. Is authentic mean if you're vulgar, you just come work and just
be
say,
vulgar.
yeah, blah,
right?
blah, blah, blah. And it's like, there is the thing. Or if you're racist, does this mean you come to work and you just give me a racist slur? I mean, there is a lot of these big wording that people need to be very careful about. It is very well meant, and I'm sure everyone who says this has the best intention, but it leads to certain things that people will, I will not say suffer from, but they will know that there are contradictory sometimes with the reality of what we live. They are too idealistic, or they are too naive. And in either case, they will not work.
Yeah. I know we can go on easily for 1 or 2 more
Oh,
hours
yes.
about all of this, especially on just the social media piece. Wow, my goodness. But unfortunately, we do have to come to a close here, Dr.
Oh,
Solomon.
yeah.
Uh,
It's like I'm putting my eyes like, wow, it's 5:13. I'm watching the
yeah,
clock. Yeah.
yeah, it went by really fast. But what I'd like to do is, I normally would like to do a full kind of recap, but for the sake and interest of time, I do want to still mention some really key points that I think are worth recapping as you've shared with us your thoughts about diversity and the effects that, the pandemic has had on how you've digitally transformed the way you deliver your services when it comes to mental health and how we operate our businesses. So, one thing that I think you are the most educated person I've ever met.
Thank you. Thank you.
One of, at least for sure, one of the most educated people I have the personal pleasure of knowing.
Thank you.
But I thought it was so interesting how you shared your story with us and how you made that transition from excelling in high school and going into a pharmacy program. And then over time, with the tragic death of your mentor, how you made a shift toward understanding human behavior. And there was something you said that really stood out for me. And that is the fact that you actually witnessed mental illness on a very bright mind. And it made me think of the movie A Beautiful Mind.
Yes.
So for whatever that's worth, that just really stood out to me for some reason. I also thought it was really important that you stressed the importance of energy management as opposed to time management. Specifically, you said, we cannot control time, but we can control energy. I also thought it was interesting that you mentioned the fact that as entrepreneurs, especially, we make many energy depleting decisions throughout the day. It's no wonder that you're exhausted by the end of the day, even if you haven't done any physically demanding things. Mental exhaustion from having to make all of these decisions that are actually very critical to your day-to-day operations. So I'm glad you pointed that out as well. Also worth mentioning, I think, is the fact that you mentioned you had a basically non-existent social media presence prior to the pandemic. But my goodness, look at where you are now. I've seen your numbers on all of those social platforms. I still haven't seen TikTok, so I'm going to make sure I go and check you out there. But I think what you said is so important about how you approach not just social media, but I would imagine any type of technology. Know the why, know the reason why you are using that particular technology, and use it in moderation because it can be addictive, especially these digital technologies. We're going to make sure that we have links to, there's so many resources that you provided, and I can't thank you enough. If you want more details about Dr. Solomon, the doc on TikTok, and the incredible work he's doing, that could be your new slogan, and the
Oh,
incredible
yes.
work that he's doing, for us as entrepreneurs and thought leaders, make sure you follow him on all of those different platforms at Dr. Solomon MD on TikTok, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, all of the above. And also his website, which is drsolomon.com. Dr. Solomon, shukran.
Oh, thank you, Afwan. Afwan.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. You learned it, yeah, from
Yes, I
Dr.
did. I did. So
And
that means thank you, everyone, in Arabic. So, but seriously, thank you so much for taking time to come onto the show today. I really appreciate it.
thank you so much for being a terrific host and being a terrific guest. People who didn't see this episode, please go and see 2 episodes of Alicia talking about operation, which is not the sexiest topic as those, but I can tell you she makes it really nice when she talks about department A, B, C. She uses colored cards in the episode. Something I learned from her. I learned from her in this episode about Notion, about other tools that she used in terms of operation, and her book. If you have not checked her latest book about business infrastructure, it's the world's first book about infrastructure on
Well, you're
Amazon.
making me blush over here, Dr. Soliman.
It is
Thank
really
you.
good. And it's, you know what? Not many people would like to talk about this, but it is the essence of work. We talk about, we
Yes.
have opinions about marketing, we have opinions about sales, but for some reason, we don't have any opinions about operation except that it is boring.
I know. We're trying to change that with this show.
Yeah. And now people really realize this through the pandemic when the supply chains were completely disrupted.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have all the marketing, you have all the sales, all the digital platforms, but you don't have products. There is no material.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know what? We're going to put links to both of those, to my appearance on your show. We'll make sure that we have links to that in the show notes for your episode. And everyone, you can find that information at businessinfrastructure.tv. Again, we'll have links to Dr. Soliman's YouTube channel, his show, The Professionals Lounge, as well as Thrive, which is the other show that he has on YouTube, as well as all of the other books and organizations and other resources that he's been so kind enough to share with us. It's going to be a very robust list. I can already tell. Again, the best way to access that information is at businessinfrastructure.tv. And when you get there, just click on the search icon at the top of the screen, type in Dr. Soliman's name, or you can click on the Listen tab and select Season 12. You'll also find more information about our sponsors. Supporting them helps us keep this show free for you. Thank you so much for tuning in and for being a loyal subscriber. Remember, stay focused, be encouraged. This entrepreneurial journey is a marathon and not a sprint. Until the next time.
Thank you for listening to Business Infrastructure, the podcast about curing back office blues with Alicia Butler-Pierre. If you like what you've heard, do us a favor and subscribe, leave a rating and review, and more importantly, share with your colleagues and team members who could benefit from the information. Join us next week for another episode of Business Infrastructure with Alicia Butler-Pierre.